In 2012, a small fishing boat drifted silently into the Pacific. When rescuers finally saw what was inside, they didn't believe it was real. Because sitting there, half-starved, covered in scars, was a man who had been missing for over a year. Doctors swore his survival was impossible, but what he said he had endured at sea is even harder to believe. Alright, let's go back to November 17, 2012. Salvador Alvarenga, a 37-year-old fisherman from El Salvador, is getting ready for what should have been a routine 2-day fishing trip off the coast of Mexico. Nothing unusual here, you know. Had been fishing these waters for years. He knew them like the back of his hand. His companion that day was Ezekiel, a 22-year-old kid, who was relatively new to deep-sea fishing. They loaded up their 23-foot fiberglass boat with supplies, fishing gear, and enough food for a couple of days at most. The weather forecast looked decent. The boat was in good shape, and honestly, they were just planning to catch some sharks and mahi-mahi to sell at the local market. But here's the thing about the ocean. It doesn't care about your plans. Around 10 a.m. that morning, they pushed off from the small port of Costa Azul, in Chiapas, Mexico, fired up the outboard motor, and they headed into the Pacific. Neither of them had any idea that they were about to enter one of the most horrific survival stories ever documented. So, for the first day, everything was normal. They caught some fish, the weather was cooperating, and was probably thinking about getting home to his family. But then, around their second day out, the weather started to change. And I mean really change. What started as some scattered clouds quickly turned into something much more serious. The wind picked up, the waves got bigger, and before they knew it, they were caught in a massive storm system that had blown in from nowhere. Now, here's where things get crazy. The storm was so intense that it knocked out their GPS, their radio, and most importantly, their motor. Tried everything he could to get that engine running again, but it was dead, completely fried, and with no way to navigate and no way to call for help. They were basically at the mercy of the Pacific Ocean. The storm pushed them further and further from shore, and within 24 hours, they had drifted so far out that land was completely out of sight. Knew they were in serious trouble, but he had no idea just how serious things were about to get. Okay, so picture this. You're stuck on a 23-foot boat with someone you barely know, floating somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. No motor, no radio, no GPS. Just you, the endless water, and whatever supplies you brought for a 2-day trip. For the first few weeks, and Ezekiel tried to stay optimistic. They rationed their small supply of food and water, hoping that a rescue boat or plane would spot them. Had been in tough situations before, and he figured they just needed to hold on until help arrived. But the Pacific Ocean is massive, and I mean absolutely massive. We're talking about 63 million square miles of water. Finding a single small boat out there is like trying to find a specific grain of sand on a beach the size of Texas. After about a month, their food ran out. Their fresh water was gone. And that's when realized something that would haunt him for the next year. Nobody was coming to save them. They were completely on their own, thousands of miles from any shipping lanes, floating in the middle of the largest ocean on Earth. So what do you do when every rational part of your brain is telling you that you're going to die? You learn to survive, and had to learn fast. First, water. You can't drink seawater, obviously, because the salt will dehydrate you even faster. But figured out how to collect rainwater using pieces of the boat's canvas. He learned to position containers to catch every drop during the brief storms that would pass through. Food was even trickier. With no fishing equipment left, had to get creative. He learned to catch sea turtles with his bare hands, which sounds impossible until you realize how desperate hunger can make you. He would drink their blood for nutrients and eat their raw meat. Yeah, I know it sounds disgusting, but when you're starving, your body will take whatever it can get. Birds were another source of food. Discovered that some seabirds would actually land on the boat to rest. He taught himself to grab them lightning fast when they weren't expecting it. Raw bird meat became a delicacy after months of eating nothing. But here's what's really incredible. Also learned to catch small fish by hand. He would wait for schools of fish to swim close to the boat, then grab them out of the water. His reflexes became almost superhuman after months of practice. Now, surviving physically is one thing, but surviving mentally, that's a whole different challenge. And 4. The psychological torture was just as brutal as the physical starvation. About 4 months in, Ezekiel started to deteriorate rapidly. The kid couldn't handle the constant hunger, the endless sun, and the psychological pressure of being lost at sea. He stopped eating, even when managed to catch food. He gave up, and sadly, after about 4.5 months, Ezekiel died, was now completely alone. And honestly, this is where most people would have lost their minds entirely. He kept Ezekiel's body on the boat for 6 days, talking to him, refusing to accept that his companion was gone. Eventually, had to make one of the hardest decisions of his life. He pushed Ezekiel's body into the ocean. For the next 10 months, was utterly alone on that boat. No human contact, no conversation, nothing but the sound of waves and his own thoughts. He started talking to himself constantly, just to hear a human voice. He talked to God. He talked to his family back home. He even talked to the fish and birds. By day Lambai should have been dead. By medical standards, no human can survive that long at sea with such limited resources. But somehow, kept going. His body had adapted in ways that doctors still don't completely understand. His skin became thick and leathery from constant sun exposure. His hair grew long and wild. His muscles wasted away. But somehow, his core functions kept working. Developed an almost supernatural ability to predict weather patterns. He could sense storms coming hours before they arrived, just by watching the waves and feeling changes in the air pressure. This skill kept him alive through countless dangerous weather events. He also became incredibly efficient at catching and preparing food. What started as desperate attempts to grab any sea creature became a refined system for hunting and eating. Learned which fish were safe to eat raw, which parts of sea turtles provided the most nutrition, and how to preserve meat in the salt air. But the mental challenges were constant. Hallucinated regularly, seeing islands that weren't there, hearing voices calling his name. Sometimes he would see ships on the horizon and desperately try to signal them, only to realize they were mirages created by his oxygen-deprived brain. Here's what kept alive when logic says he should have died: his absolute refusal to give up. Even when every rational part of his brain told him it was hopeless, he kept fighting. Created routines to maintain his sanity. Every morning, he would clean the boat. He would check his makeshift fishing equipment. He would look for signs of land or rescue. These simple activities gave his day structure and purpose. He also held on to powerful memories of his family. Had a daughter back in El Salvador, and the thought of seeing her again became his anchor. When the hallucinations got bad, when the pain became unbearable, he would focus on her face and promise himself he would make it home. Religious faith played a huge role too. Prayed constantly, and he believed that God was keeping him alive for a reason. Whether you're religious or not, that kind of unshakable belief can be incredibly powerful when you're facing impossible odds. After more than a year at sea, started noticing changes in the ocean around him. The water was different, the types of fish were different, and most importantly, he started seeing more birds. For weeks, watched as the signs grew stronger. More seabirds, different colors in the water, and occasionally, pieces of debris that suggested human activity somewhere nearby. After 438 days of drifting, boat was getting close to something. On January 30th, 2014, spotted something that made his heart race. The shoreline of a small atoll. After more than a year of seeing nothing but endless ocean, there was actually land in front of him. But get this, was so weakened by his ordeal that he couldn't even swim to shore. The boat eventually washed up on the beach of Eben Atoll in the Marshall Islands, over 5,000 miles from where his journey had started. The local residents who found couldn't believe what they were seeing. Here was this wild-looking man, emaciated, covered in sores, with hair down to his shoulders and a beard that hadn't been trimmed in over a year. At first, they thought he might be dead, was barely conscious, and couldn't speak clearly. When he tried to explain what had happened to him, the locals thought he was either crazy or lying. I mean, who survives 438 days lost at sea? It sounded impossible. The Marshall Islands authorities immediately contacted medical professionals and was rushed to a hospital. The doctors were amazed that he was even alive. His body weight had dropped dramatically. He was severely dehydrated despite months of collecting rainwater, and he showed signs of extreme vitamin deficiency. But here's the kicker: was conscious, coherent, and determined to tell his story. As the medical team examined him, they realized they were looking at one of the most extraordinary cases of human survival ever documented. So the doctors ran every test they could think of. As survival challenged everything they knew about human physiology and the limits of what the body can endure. Normally, a person can survive about 3 weeks without food and 3 days without water. Had been surviving for over a year with minimal and irregular access to both. His body had somehow adapted to function on the absolute minimum calories needed to stay alive. His cardiovascular system was still working, though weakened. His kidneys were processing what little water he could collect. His digestive system had learned to extract maximum nutrition from the raw fish, turtle meat, and bird meat he was consuming. Medically speaking, had become a completely different version of himself. The psychological evaluation was just as remarkable. Despite over a year of isolation, hallucinations, and extreme trauma, mind was still intact. He could remember details from his ordeal with startling clarity. He could describe specific days, specific catches, specific storms. His mental resilience had somehow matched his physical endurance. Now, here's where things get complicated. When story went public, a lot of people didn't believe him. Critics argued that no human could survive that long at sea, that his story had too many impossible elements. Some experts questioned how he maintained his body weight, how he avoided fatal dehydration, and how he navigated the psychological trauma without completely losing his mind. Fair questions, honestly, but account was consistent every time he told it. Medical examinations supported his claims about his physical condition. And most importantly, there was physical evidence. His boat, his makeshift survival equipment, and scars on his body that matched his descriptions of his ordeals. The controversy actually highlights something important about human survival. We tend to underestimate what the human body and mind can accomplish under extreme circumstances. Story pushes the boundaries of what we think is possible, but that doesn't make it impossible. So how did actually do it? Scientists who studied his case identified several factors that contributed to his survival. First, S. background as an experienced fisherman gave him crucial knowledge about ocean survival that most people don't have. He understood tides, weather patterns, and marine life in ways that helped him adapt to his situation. Second, his body composition and metabolism apparently allowed him to survive on far fewer calories than most people would need. Some humans have genetic variations that make them more efficient at processing nutrients and surviving during food scarcity. Third, and this is huge, mental approach to survival was extraordinary. Instead of panicking or giving up, he treated each day as a new problem to solve. That kind of psychological resilience can literally mean the difference between life and death. But even with all these factors, survival was still a statistical miracle. The combination of physical endurance, mental strength, and pure luck that kept him alive for 438 days represents one of the most remarkable human achievements ever recorded. When finally made it back to civilization, his ordeal wasn't over. He had to learn how to live on land again, after spending over a year adapting to life at sea. Simple things like sleeping in a bed, eating cooked food, and being around other people became challenges. S. body had become so accustomed to the motion of the boat that he felt dizzy and unsteady when walking on solid ground. Psychologically, struggled with what we now recognize as a severe form of PTSD. He had nightmares about being back on the boat, anxiety attacks in enclosed spaces, and difficulty trusting that his rescue was real and permanent. But also became something of a celebrity. His story was covered by news organizations around the world. He wrote a book about his experience and became an advocate for maritime safety and rescue operations. Story raises some fascinating questions about human potential. What are the actual limits of human survival? How much can our bodies and minds endure before they break completely? Scientists estimate that only a handful of people in human history have survived such extended periods of isolation and deprivation. Joined an incredibly exclusive group of humans who have pushed survival to its absolute limits and lived to tell about it. His case has influenced maritime survival training, emergency preparedness protocols, and our understanding of human psychology under extreme stress. Didn't just survive, he expanded our knowledge of what survival actually means. But maybe the most important lesson from Story isn't about the mechanics of staying alive. Maybe it's about the power of refusing to give up, even when giving up would be completely rational. After 438 days lost at sea, Salvador Alvarenga had become something that shouldn't exist. According to medical science, a human being who survived longer in the open ocean than anyone before him. His story challenges our assumptions about the limits of human endurance. It shows us that the line between possible and impossible isn't as clear as we think it is. Sometimes, the human spirit can accomplish things that seem to defy the laws of nature itself. Survival wasn't just about catching fish or collecting rainwater. It was about maintaining hope when hope seemed pointless. It was about fighting for life when death would have been easier. It was about believing in rescue when rescue seemed impossible. So the next time you think you've reached your limit, remember Alvarenga. Remember that somewhere out there, a man spent over a year alone on the Pacific Ocean and refused to quit. Because sometimes, The impossible is just another word for what we haven't accomplished yet. If incredible story of survival inspired you, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable, true stories that push the boundaries of human experience. Drop a comment below and let me know. Could you have survived 438 days lost at sea? What do you think was the key to survival? And hey, if you want to dive deeper into stories of impossible human endurance, check out our playlist of survival documentaries. Trust me, story is just the beginning of what humans can accomplish when everything is on the line. Thanks for watching, and until next time, remember that the human spirit is capable of things that science can't always explain.